Okay. How are you, Brian?
Rosh, I'm fine.
All right. Stay that way. Okay. I'm not getting sick these days, The thing to do. Page 55. Okay, we're talking about the Eight Sahara. We're talking about the Eight Sahara. Let's go back just a little bit to page 50. We'll just do the top, the actual Chovos haLevavos. V'amal choset shepaga anoshim shavim u'chemes oivim. V'shalu sholo lacha milchama chazaka. Spoke about a choset that met some people coming back from a war, and they were bringing back the sholo, the booty, after a very difficult battle. Amalem shavtim and milchama ketana. You're returning from a small war, small battle. Shailulim shala hitadu. Get ready for the future. Milchama gedola. Amalei mayim milchama gedola. What's this big milchama? We just went back a little bit to page 50, just on top. Amalei milchama hayetzer b'chayolav. It's the milchama of the Yetzer and his soldiers. Minateimachti says it's a wonder. Says my brother. It's an amazing thing, my brother. Kikol oyev sheishoi. Any enemy that you have, when you conquer him once, twice, defeat him, so he'll leave you alone. And you won't even think of continuing to. He sees you can't beat you, so he gives up. Because he realizes you're stronger than him. He gives up hope of conquering you. But the Yetzirah is never discouraged. And it doesn't matter whether you fight it once or 100 times. Whether he defeats you, whether you defeated him. If he defeats you, it will kill you. If you defeat it once, will lie in wait, in ambush. For the rest of your life, the Natsechos are hoping to defeat you. As Chazal taught us, don't trust yourself. So the day of your death, the Yetzirah doesn't give up. The Einoi Mekel. And he doesn't consider the smallest of your activities as too insignificant to defeat you. Rather, that's his plan. He goes for the small thing. It should be a step. It should be a step to then conquer you, like the ladder. Goes one step at a time. Therefore, you have to be very careful. You always have to be on guard. And don't fulfill the Yetzirah's requests on anything. Don't say, okay, this is a little thing, so I'll do it. What's the big spiel? No, Adara, but that's the hole in the dike. That's the place where he gets in. You can't give him any ground. Rather, you should view the smallest of his victories as a tremendously big thing. In the little step of his strength, as they translate that. There we go. Oh, only think of its smallest victory and slightest increase of its power as the biggest misfortune. For it will be a step towards higher than that, because it would soon have a desire to come against you, achieving another victory. He never lets go. But it won't stand against you if you stand up to it. We have. So we can stand up against the Yetzirah, as it says, The Yitzhahara wants to get overruled, to rule you, but you could rule it. Again, don't be intimidated by his words, by it. No matter how strong its armies are, don't be intimidated. Don't be afraid of it. No matter how many allies it can muster. Doesn't matter. Don't be afraid of it. You could stand it. The main intent, this is where we were up to, of the Yitzhahara is to make truth out of falsehood. It's that you'll believe the falsehood is true. You believe his stories. You believe when even sometimes you know it's not true. You know you're being convinced. But that's the koyach of the Yetzer. That's how he tries to get us. And his goal is to uphold deception. How close is its defeat? And how quickly is its destruction in Tagish Shasai? If you recognize this weakness, if you recognize that he doesn't really have any truth, it's all sheker. The truth is that you don't sin. The truth is you don't do affairs. The truth is that you overcome him. And that what he's selling you isn't truth. He's selling you Olam Haba, Olam Haza. It's not true. He's selling you pleasures that don't last. And if you could just recognize that, says the haLevavos, so we could recognize that that's what Yitzhar is doing. He's trying to make truth out of falsehood, and we recognize that, then it's easy to overcome it, he's saying. He says, Gemara asks, why is Gehenna called by that name? Doesn't say where this Gemara is. It's because people fall into Gehenna for things that are chinam, yehinam, like from the word china. They're all sheker, all imagination. This is the most important weapon of the Yitzhar. We have to utilize our minds to gain awareness of the truth. And when we have a clear picture of the truth, then we have to fight back against the Yitzhar. So when a woman admits that her husband is not the father of her son, it's the worst thing that could be. But to Christians, it's a great occasion. A boy is born from a mother who admits that her husband is not the father, and now season's greetings. All over the world, people are happy and singing and enjoying. This is the most terrible occasion there is. The Arabs claim they have a right to the haLevavos because Muhammad or Meshuggah said he got on a horse on the mountain of the Beis HaMikdash, and the horse flew from Yerushalayim to Mecca. Muhammad writes in his book that in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, what?
Was it a horse or a donkey?
A horse. Muhammad writes in his book that in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, when Paro wanted to make decrees against the Jews, he called in an expert on anti-Semitism, Haman. A few pages later, Muhammad writes that Paro called in Haman a second time. Muhammad believed that Haman lived in the time of Paro, and he helped Paro plan the decrees against the Jews. The whole thing is ridiculous. Wherever we look, we see the stupidity all around us. It's a world of lies. As now the haLevavos explains, with a bit of common sense, you can rescue the city against the big king of falsehood that's besieging. This is the Yisraeli saying here. And we have to remember that the Yitzhahara is sheker. And everything Yitzhahara is trying to sell us is sheker. And if we have a clarity of the emes, if we can have a clarity of the truth, then the battle is won. As Shlomo Melch said about him, there's a small city with only a few inhabitants. A great king came upon it, surrounded it, and built great siege works over it. There was found in the city a poor wise man who by his wisdom saved the town. Yet no one remembered that poor man. Koheles, Periktes. The Shalom described it as a person in a small city because the person is an Olam HaKot. The Sibra al Klei Gufa Yemidas Nafshay Banoshim At. And in the Moshel, he referred to it that in this small city, which is referring to the Adam, who's an Olam HaKot, there were a few people. It means that what he had at his hands, his Klei Gufa and Midas, was few. Banoshim At. Umoatu Etzla Keneged Kedel Leva Adam. And the abilities of a person to fight back are considered small when you compare how great are all the temptations and desires of man and the resources of the outside material world. The world is so big. We're so small to fight everything that the world throws at us. And Shlomo described the Yetzer Hara as a great king with a lot of soldiers. And he described that the king the Yetzer Hara surrounded the small town Neshumakif called Yonei Adam in Yerav and start. This Yetzer Hara surrounds us in all of our affairs, whether open or in private. Wherever we are, the Yetzer Hara is there. He surrounds us on all sides. And he said that he built great siege works, big things around the city. The Ravi Hura of Haroyim, Umachshavais of Harois, Umikar of Hamagun. And Karel said that that he says that he built this great mitzoidim around the city to the multitude of evil imaginings, hero Haroyim, Umachshavais of Harois, evil thoughts, Umikrav Hamagunim and shameful incidents, Shemishtad Lahamis as Odom, to which the Yetzer tries to ruin the person. We'll explain further in this shar with the help of Hashem. Okay, so let's go back a little bit and see how Rav Miller explained all of this. And he writes on page 57, this wise man with his stratagems was able to cause them to have a victory over the king. The story is actually a mashal to illustrate the battle between and his Yetzer Hara. The person is represented by a small town with only a few people to defend it. That small town corresponds to a man with his limited resources. That's the small town. So a few people defend it, trying to defend himself against a powerful king that's attacking it. That king is the Yetzer Hara, which has many resources and allies, including newspapers, movies, media, colleges, churches, great cathedrals. Defending against this great power is a small, weak town. The king is surrounded it and trying to break in. But the town does have something with the potential to reverse the imbalance, and that's the intellect, or Yetzer Tov. In the story, the intellect is symbolized by a poor wise person who's usually ignored. Right? It said there, Ish Miskein, Chocham, right? We neglect him, never trying to make him wealthy by giving him more information. By learning Muslims for him, that makes him stronger. He's poor and weak, but very wise. And this poor, neglected man can save us. Seichel can give us advice to rescue us from the enemy. Okay, and then he describes some more that the Yetzer is called the Melech Gadol. The resources of the outside material world are allied with all of the temptations and desires that proceed to man at all times. Again, like we said, that's what the world was created for. The world was created to be in the science. So the world all over. That's the purpose. That's why Hashem designed the world. It's in the science. And how little is the ability of a person, how small is his understanding of what's being done against them. If you look at the world, almost everything in it is in support of the Yetzer Hara. The streets is all Yetzer Hara, because the street gives you ideas that you know are wrong. The libraries are Yetzer Hara, schools are Yetzer Hara, churches are Yetzer Hara, the newspapers are Yetzer Hara, the movie theaters are Yetzer Hara. Wherever you turn, there are implements of the Yetzer Hara, and they're big and powerful. And he never came around the internet.
I guess so. I don't know. I guess so.
And it says the king built great siege works. These
I
are
don't know.
the embankments around the city where soldiers can stand and shoot arrows over the city walls into the town. It seems that the town is lost, right? How could you win this? Okay, so here there's a whole page here. All right, he gives examples of how dangerous the what's out there, and in our generation, it's even so much more. Okay, but back to the small town story on page 62. What Kahela said that he found in the city a poor wise man who by his wisdom saved the town with Soina Loimar ala Seichel. It's referring to the Seichel. Why does he call him a poor man? Because he has very few helpers and supporters. The intellect that seeks the truth has many enemies, but few allies to assist it. There are yeshivas, rebbes, tamir chama, but they're not as many as the rishonim that are available all around us. So he's called a miskin, a poor person, because it would seem that he has less tools on his side. As it says further, no one remembered that poor man. He was considered poor because he was ignored by everybody. It says also, I guess, in Koheles, the wisdom of the poor man is despised. People despise the natural ability to have to think and fight against the Yetzer Hara because the Yetzer Hara doesn't have big institutions to help it. Huge universities, because the Yetzer Tov doesn't have. Huge universities and libraries. The Imchul Shasai. And despite its weakness, we have already described the urgency of the Yetzer Hara's desire to fight and defeat the intellect. And the power of Yetzer Hara can easily be repelled from the person. But it's only if the man resists. If he doesn't fight back, the Yetzer Hara will continue to press him and ultimately overcome him. Now, why is it? Continues the Chovos haLevavos. Why is it that we're saying that with what seems to be relatively ease, this poor person, this intellect that doesn't have someone that is, at his means to fight the Yetzer Hara, that has the whole world, everything the Yetzer Hara is the Yetzer Hara's tools. Why is it that he says it's still the power of the Yetzer Hara can easily be repelled from a person. Famous statement. A little bit of truth can overcome a great deal of falsehood. Like a little bit of light overcomes a great deal of darkness. If you walk into a big dark room with a little candle, you can already see where you're going. So a little bit of light is the most precious thing. That's why it's so important to learn a little bit of Muslim, like the Chovos haLevavos, because it's a little bit of a light in the dark world that we live in. But that's what he's saying, a little bit of truth. It's the light. Pushes away a lot of shekels. Even though Yetzer Hara has so much at its means, and we have so little, but our little is much more powerful. You put on the light, the whole room is light. In a big room, you put on the light, and you pushed everything away. And if you have the light of Torah and you have the light of the intellect, then all these arguments and all of these persuasions and all these things go out the window. But that light, he's saying, is learning Mussar. This is also true for a person who learns Gemara. A little bit of the light of Torah can help him overcome a great deal of trouble that he would have had if he didn't learn. This is the Shita of or Sameach. I just read that Rav Aaron Leib Steinman was of this Shita also. First thing to sit with a Chiloni is open up a Gemara and learn nothing. Don't get into big arguments and philosophy. And the light of Torah in itself, the Koyach of Torah, just makes everything else happen. For instance, you have to be responsible, not the damage. Here, Rav Miller is saying it a little bit different. A little bit of the light of Torah can help him overcome a great deal of trouble that he would have had if he didn't learn. For instance, you have to be responsible not to damage other people's property. How much trouble could a man avoid in life if he was aware of that? But for those who didn't learn, they think that whatever they do is permissible, so they get into all kinds of difficulty. Because they walk in darkness. Whatever Torah Yerushalayim and Mussar you acquire is like the candle in your hand. Now, of course, we're not talking about the foolish people who bring the Yetzer Hara into their homes intentionally. People who bring TVs. This was one of his big battles. Today, we're so far away from that. Now the battle is with the internet, but people who bring TVs into the house are bringing the Yetzer Hara into the house of their own free will. There's a family with a 15-year-old daughter who has a boyfriend. They consider themselves from people, Orthodox people. A 15-year-old girl with a boyfriend means you're leading her directly into the hands of the Yetzer Hara. Or you see boys in yarmulkes standing in line outside a movie theater. These boys are going directly to the house of the Yetzer Hara. We're not talking about insane people. We're talking about decent people who would like to live a life of Kedusha, but they're not prepared to resist the temptations of the falsehood delivered by the Yetzer Hara. A theater is like the ultimate example of the sheker, right? You throw this picture on the screen, and everybody knows that this is just a story. It's a bluff. It's not true. Yet you sit there and you gobble it up and you internalize the quote-unquote truths that are being projected on the screen. It's a bluff. There's a place called Hollywood that's all made up. There's no evidence there. And yet you sit there, I remember there was a movie. I didn't go to it, don't worry. I didn't go to it. It was a very gory movie. I forgot what it was called. Like in the movie, like people's heads turned around and stuff. Forgot what it was called.
The Exorcist?
Yeah, The Exorcist, right. See, it's from our times. See. In any case, and I had some friends that went there, and they sat in the theater. There was write-ups how people were vomiting, and it was a horrible thing. But I had some friends that went, and they sat there and they laughed through the whole thing. And some people afterwards said, "You guys are disgusting. How could you laugh?" They said it was so fake. It was so it was such it was so unreal that it became a joke to them, But the rest of the world was looking at this, and then Amish people would vomit. They were sick from it. It's the ultimate falsehood, and he's saying people walk in there, and they're walking into the Yetzer Hara's hands. Those who openly and intentionally put the Yetzer Hara into themselves and the children are a different story. These words have no connection to them. As we have seen, Chovos haLevavos compares the Yetzer Hara to a mighty king who's attacking a small town. Why does Kehelis describe the wise man that saves the town as a poor wise man? Because we ignore him most of the time. He's poor. Nobody looks at him. We don't use our mind. And yet he's the man with the common sense who's able to save us from the power of the Yetzer Hara. Right? But when you start learning Musa, then the truths become so obvious, so evident. And that's such a big step in breaking the power of the Yetzer Hara, the power of the lures of this world, the temptations of this world, which don't have to be taivas, they could be just misguided, that this is the end, this is the purpose of the world, and this is what we live in, and this is what there is. All the falsehoods of the world, a little Musa gives you that clarity. You have such a powerful tool then to deal with it. All right, let's stop here. When it goes on, so let's stop here.